All right, so we have good energy. So a little bit about how I'd like to do this. So Chad was gracious enough to offer me an opportunity to come and one, come back to campus. I haven't been back in a while, and then two, to do this. And so I was very happy to do that. Here's what I'd like to do. So we have a little less than an hour, and I am here to be of service to you. I will tell you a little bit about myself, my background, my experience at Purdue, and some of my career and life experiences. But I prefer, rather than talk at you, to talk with you. And so I'm hopeful that as I describe some of the things that I've done, and you let me know when you're ready to take a picture, I'll pose. As I describe some of the things that I've done, there may be some things that might be of particular interest, and I like questions. So this is a small group, and so I think we can handle a little kind of intimacy here in our conversation. So if there's any thoughts or questions that you have, I'd encourage you to raise your hand and ask them, because I think it'll make it more entertaining for you, and it'll make it more entertaining for me, because I don't know what you're going to ask. And so, is that fair? That works? Okay. So, so in terms of my background, so I currently serve. I'm president of Holland America Cruise Lines. I've been in that role since for almost a year. I took that job in December of last year. Some of you already know this because you read my bio, but I took the job in December, and I took my very first cruise December 5th. And so some would say, how does a person that's never been on a cruise become president of a 142-year-old cruise line? So that gives you a little bit of insight into my personality and kind of how I've lived my life. So I've been attracted to challenges and opportunities, and when those have been presented to me, I've tended to jump into them. So I'll tell you a few stories about jumping into things, including coming to Purdue, which I don't know, Chad, you may or may not know this. So how did I even end up here? So I grew up in New Jersey. Actually, Candace and I went to the same high school. I graduated high school in 1986, and the summer after my junior year, I participated in a minority introduction to engineering program and got connected to the university through that. Had no intention on coming here. I was from New Jersey, so I was applying to Penn State and Rutgers and MIT and all those schools. But there was no fee for your application fee, so I went ahead and sent in an application to Purdue. And then I got accepted, and I'd had a good experience. And so I had a partial scholarship to Purdue, and I had a full scholarship to Rutgers University. And all my life, my mom had said, so basically, we can't afford to send you to school, so you better get a scholarship, because that's the only way you're going. So the letter came in. I had gotten a full ride to Rutgers University, and my mother and I did the celebratory dance in the kitchen. So in my mind, I figured I was going to Rutgers University. Now, I had saved a little bit of money because I'd had some summer jobs, and my parents had saved a little bit of money. So in my mind, since I have college covered, that money is now mine. So after doing the celebratory dance with my mom, I went into the other room, called one of my best friends at the time. You remember Azuka? And so he and I began to plan our college experience at Rutgers. And there was never a mention of books or classes or anything in that conversation. So by 5 o'clock that afternoon, my parents come in at dinner and they say, you know, Orlando, we've been thinking and we've decided that we're going to go ahead and figure it out and we're going to send you to Purdue. Yeah, and I didn't find out until my sophomore year that the only reason is because my mother had overheard that conversation with my best friend. And that's a true story, so that's how I ended up here. But it ended up being probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that happened to me here. Many are wonderful, some are not so wonderful, but even in some of those not so wonderful things, it's definitely prepared me for sort of the career acceleration that I've enjoyed. I'll highlight some of that a little bit. So I started my career with Anderson Consulting. Some of you had asked me this. And so I started my career in consulting coming out of school. Spent a number of years doing that, traveling and working with large organizations. I worked for Ameritech. I worked for a small boutique consulting firm out of New York called Delta Consulting. I then went from there and I worked for Motorola. Anybody here remember the Razor phone? Okay, so I'm still not too old, so some people remember that phone. So I was part of the team that brought that phone to market. It's an interesting story about that phone. We kind of turned Motorola around, was a part of that team. Left Motorola, went to work for Coca-Cola. Anybody remember Coca-Cola? Okay, usually get all hands with that one. So started with Coca-Cola in Atlanta, and then my Coca-Cola then sent me on an opportunity. I moved to Istanbul, Turkey, and lived in Istanbul, Turkey. I ran human resources for Eurasia and Africa, managed everything from Moscow to Cape Town, did that for about 3 years. I'll tell a quick story, again with the theme of jumping into things with maybe not always thinking about it. So my boss calls me in, says, Orlando, we'd like to present you with an opportunity to go international, and that was something that I aspired to do. So they offered me, you can go to London, and you can go to Turkey. On the spot, I said, absolutely, I want to go to Turkey. Bigger challenge, bigger opportunity. Now, I forgot to mention I have a wife and 2 kids at home. I hadn't kind of discussed it with them. So I walk in the house that night. Now we're in Atlanta. We just built this beautiful home. We lived in it about 9 months. I bust through the door. Hey, honey, guess what? We got the call. We're going international. She says, well, where are we going? Another mistake I made, I said, guess. So she starts naming cities like London, Paris, Rome, Mexico City. I'm like, nope, 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 nope. So after about the 8th nope, she says, well, where are we going? I said, well, what do you think about Istanbul? She says, I don't, and walked out. So that was on Friday, but by Monday we had worked it out, went to Turkey, and it was absolutely the best thing that happened to me, both personally and professionally, just in terms of the cultural and global diversity that I had a chance to get connected to. And so I always tell people at whatever point you're at in your life, travel is a pretty powerful thing. I think it's probably one of the most important things for us to do, and one of the ways that we're going to break down barriers around miscommunication, prejudice, misperceptions, because once you've actually spent time with a person from a different part of the world, it's really hard to have some of the negative energy that sometimes gets promoted in the media. So that's something that I've kept from that experience, and so probably part of the reason why I'm running a major cruise line. Left Coca-Cola and was recruited back to the East Coast, was the head of HR for Marsh & McLennan Companies in New York, did that for about just under 5 years. And then I had a boss that saw a few things in me and encouraged me to do more than just HR, thought I could be a CEO one day, and so encouraged me to take on some other departments. So I ran marketing, I ran sales, I ran corporate social responsibility and the like, and then moved into running a $600+ million consulting practice in New York. Did that for about 2 years, and then was recruited to the cruise industry and took over Holland America Line. And so that's my quick career story. How many people here, I know a couple of you are, how many people here are cruisers? All right, great. How many people are not? Potential opportunity. So I'll talk to you later. And I know a few of you actually cruised on my line, which is great. Thank you for your business. It's an exciting industry, and so when you say, how can a person that's never done it do it? Well, I wasn't hired because of my detailed knowledge and expertise around cruising. I was hired for my expertise around running businesses and tapping into people. And so my undergrad degree is in organizational leadership from Purdue. My master's degree is in industrial technology from Purdue. Both of those degrees had focus on people, organizations. How do you take constructs with large groups of people, structure them in a way that maximizes the impact of those individuals on the intended outcome, the objectives of the company. And so that's been what I've done as a consultant, that's what I've done as an HR person, and that's what I'm doing now as a business president. And so I'm enjoying some of the challenges with that. I'm happy to talk about cruising as long as you want, but I was challenged to talk about some of the specific things about Purdue, and that sort of shaped that career. So I'll try to get into some of those things. Any reactions, questions, or comments about what I've covered thus far? Okay, cool. So another story that I will tell. So when I got here, Candace, I don't think you and I have ever talked about this, but I'll tell you how I felt. So came here from a public school in New Jersey, graduated in sort of the top of my class, thought I was pretty smart, until I got here. And I remember sitting in calculus class and being in a seat and the professor making a comment, look to the left and look to the right. Statistically speaking, one of the three of you is going to fail this class. And some of you have heard this speech and you're all nodding. Great. So I said, well, it's not going to be me because I'm top of my class, right? I went to Franklin High School and they told me I was really smart, so not a problem. And then the professor said, well, here's the book that you're going to have this semester. And literally, the person to the left and the person to the right of me said, oh, great, that's the same book we had in high school. So I said, oh, it's me. I'm already in a hole. Problem one. So I literally walked out of class and I called Mr. Terrell and started complaining. You got me thinking I'm smart. I'm not that smart. I'm underprepared. So one of my early lessons was the context in which you're performing is important. And that wasn't, at the time, wasn't the best feeling, but that's probably one of my favorite stories because clearly I figured it out. My first semester here was not a pleasant one in terms of academics, in terms of social integration, in terms of racial integration. So there were tensions that existed here at the university at the time I was here, and some of those maybe even still exist. But those were things that I needed to overcome in order to get what I needed to get from Purdue University. And so I'm proud of, one, that I did that, and two, to be standing in a room like this and being asked to highlight my background and experience, because those are things that I've pulled on throughout my career in an effort to try to be effective and successful. So the other lesson that I learned when I was here is the importance of focusing on what you truly believe in. Purdue is known for its engineering program. I came here to study engineering. I have to tell a quick story about my father. So when I was growing up, we had three choices in my house. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. That's what we talked about. Those are good career choices. I was here. I was pretty good in math and science, so started out here in engineering. I got introduced to the organizational leadership program as a freshman, and I was inspired by it. I thought this was a good fit. It was something that I wanted to do. So after my freshman year, I come home and I go, Dad, I want to change my major. And my dad says, well, to what, doctor or lawyer? Because you're studying engineering. And I start to go into this speech about this new program, and it's called organizational leadership, blah, blah, blah. My dad says, so as long as we're helping you pay for school, the only thing you're going to do is lead yourself back to Purdue, and we're going to get this engineering degree. And so that was the end of that conversation. So, Chad, 3 years later, as a junior, I get the job as an RA, and so guess what? I am now paying for school, and so the day after I got the letter from you, I changed my major, much to the chagrin of my father. It took him about 8 years to, it was once, when I built the house in Chicago, he said, okay, maybe you know what you're doing with this HR stuff. But I've always tell that story to people because I do think if I would have eventually graduated and gotten a degree in engineering, but I would have probably been an average engineer. So I wasn't passionate about it. Wasn't my passion. I moved into something that I loved, and that's why I think my career has gone so well. It's because of that. And so it was a tough decision to make. This is a wonderful university for engineering, and people celebrate it for that, but that wasn't for me. So I needed to make sure I extracted what was right for me out of my time here. And then I've told that story a number of times. Some of you may remember Scott Ambrose, the big shot putter. He was on my floor, and I was at Anderson Consulting. I was back here recruiting. Now I have to paint this picture. Scott was a shot putter here, so I'm a big guy, but he made me small. Big neck and big arms and big guy. And so I'm in line, and I'm talking to students because we're here recruiting, and he's standing in my line waiting to talk to me. I was his counselor. So we come up, and Scott, how you doing? Hey, Orlando, how's it going? He says, great. And the last time I remember chatting with him, he was an engineering student. And so I said, hey, so how's it going? Did you finish up, and how's the engineering thing going? He says, oh, no, I changed my major. I said, oh, okay. Well, to what? And I think he'd gotten a degree in construction technology or something like that. I said, okay, well, why'd you do that? Because of you. So I immediately get nervous because I didn't know if he was here to choke me or not. And so he tells me a story about some night he came, I was in my room, I was studying, he walked in my room, and he says, Orlando, tell me again why you changed your major. Tell me that story. So the story basically that I just told you. So I kind of went through it. I said, look, don't let your parents, your grandparents, your friends dictate your life. You need to do what you want to do, what you're passionate about. And he said after that night, the next day, he went and changed his major. So I was glad this one worked out. But it also made me aware of, because some of you know me, if you ask me a question, I'll give you a pretty pointed response. And so the power of advice, the power of the word, so the advice that you give and the impact that it can have on others literally can change lives. And then the power that those words can have on you literally can change your life. And so it's made me a lot more thoughtful about the things that I say and how I say them, because oftentimes people are listening. So the other thing I'm happy about, I've written a book. It's called Talentism. I wrote it last year. After 10 years of encouragement, I decided to take some thoughts and put it down on paper. So Talentism is a study. In that book, I predict a bit of a disruption in the way people get connected to jobs and jobs to people. And so things like social media crawling, facial recognition, psychometric testing, online video interviewing are promised to be better predictors of job fit. And so I encourage those of you that are thinking about a job or in the job market or have people that are thinking about a job to pay attention to these algorithms that are being written, because those are going to be the filters for connections to jobs, more so than the 45-minute interview. And so for those of us that are either attracting talent, or those of us that want to be considered as talent, or those of us that are looking for second and third careers, it's these tools that are going to actually help enable people to get connected to jobs. And so I'll give you two examples, one that will encourage you and one that will scare you, just to prove my point. So in writing this book, there was a Harvard professor who believes he can solve the talent problem through technology, through math. And so he created a small company. He focused on hospitals. He focused on entry-level positions, high turnover entry-level positions, 4 hospitals, 2 data points. So 1, a quiz, questionnaire, and 2, a social media profile based on information out there in the ethos. That's one that part should scare you a little bit. So those 2 data points, they claim to be able to be 85% predictive of job fit. So if you fill this out, I can sift through and find people that are 85% better fit for a given job. Now, one of the best indicators of fit is turnover, because if you're a good fit for a job, you love it, you'll stay. So in the 4 hospitals that they ran this technology with these 2 data points, they were able to reduce turnover between 47 and 56%, which is pretty phenomenal. And so at the time, this is a previous life, I was helping this company try to figure out how to scale this tool or this technology. The other story that I'll tell you, if you think after 9/11, there's a lot of facial recognition technology that you're finding in airports and people being randomly selected and pulled out of lines. Well, those random selections aren't very random. So what's happening is your face throws off facial cues where people can understand, predict those that have malintent when they're walking through a system. And so the same people that built that technology decided that they wanted to take some of that science and apply it to some other applications. And so they were building a tool that could take facial recognition and be predictive of health ailments like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. As they were doing this technology work, they were also throwing off information that was predictive of leadership capability and decision making. And so as a person that was running an HR firm, they said, well, we're here to fix health ailments. You're in the leadership space. You might be interested in this technology. So I was supposed to meet with these guys for an hour. I spent 4 hours with them because I was intrigued by this. Now think about it. Here's a sense where you could take your phone, point at yourself, answer some questions. So not only could I determine that you're a good fit for a job, I can also predict that you're going to be sick. And what do? You're perfect for the job, but you're going to be sick in a year and a half. And so some of the social implications are pretty mind-boggling. It's not the world that's coming, it's the world that's here. These technologies exist, we just haven't figured out how to apply them and how to stack them. So for those of you that thought about that or are in that world or have loved ones that are, I would encourage you to pay more attention to these tools, because everything you do, the websites you go to, the things you buy, the questions that you answer. In fact, the best piece of advice is anything that you're asked to do that's free, it's not actually free, you're the product. So, hey, take this credit card or take this thing or swipe this, and we just want to understand a little bit better about you. Well, any of those things that are free, they're collecting information and you're the product. Somebody is paying you for it. And so I would encourage you to make sure you're spending time on it or thinking about it. Does that make sense? Any questions about any of that? Okay. All right, cool. The other thing that I learned here around the importance of building a brand, an executive presence, and Chad kind of alluded to it before. So I've always had, I guess, some aspirations. I didn't exactly know for what. In fact, I'll tell this story. I just made this up right now, but it's kind of funny. Some of you may remember this. Anybody remember the show L.A. Law? Okay, so L.A. Law, I thought it was a cool show, and there was the character played by Blair Underwood. So the young, kind of cocky African-American lawyer that wore the nice suits and had the briefcase. That's what I wanted to be. And so I had a mental picture in my mind around how I sort of wanted to be positioned as a professional. So it just happened, I was in New York last week doing a big press event, and I'm walking along the street, and guess who I bump into? Blair Underwood. I had a chance to tell him that story. He said, you have no idea how you've influenced my life, and we've never met until right now today, because my life is wearing fancy suits and carrying a briefcase. And that's a picture that I've always had in my head. And so the power of creating a vision for what it is that you want to do and be, and then trying to lean into it and grow into it. I don't know where I got that from, but that's something that I've always had. It's interesting. So today, there's this opportunity, and I'm here to share anything that I've done or have experienced that will be of help to you. And it's wonderful to see so many alums here. It's unfortunate not to see enough students here. When I was a student, I never missed these, because that's how I painted the picture for what I thought I wanted to be when I grew up, by trying to take little bits from anyone that was already out there doing it and saying that works for me and that works for me, and then putting that together as a package that defines Orlando as a professional, and that's worked for me. And so it's unfortunate that, and I get it, because there's some really good distractions out there that sometimes rather partake in, but as you start thinking about and planning your career, this is a very powerful network, and the Purdue network affords some pretty amazing opportunities to hear things. The other interesting story I'll tell that I learned or got from being here is this idea of what I'll call cross-cultural competence. So to help with that, I'll tell a little bit of a story. So I was born in Bangor, Maine. I was the first African-American baby born in St. Joseph's Hospital in 1968. I was in the paper. It was big news. Black baby born today. St. Joseph's Hospital. My dad worked for the government. That's where we were when I was born. I think I was first, but I know I was newsworthy. And so that's where I was born. I lived in Pennsylvania. I lived in Jersey. I lived in rural Albany, Georgia. For anyone, yeah, there you go. I don't even have to tell the story. You know, I lived in Albany, Georgia. We moved back to Jersey. This is all before I came to Purdue. Now, what I was gathering from all those different experiences, so even in just that, that was all on the East Coast of the United States, but those were all very different areas, as you can imagine. And so I had developed a skill set, what I'll call kind of a cultural competence, an ability to sort of shift the way I communicated in style. Didn't realize that until I got here to Purdue, because then I started interacting with a lot of people that were from where they were from. I'm from Chicago, I'm from Gary, I'm from Indianapolis, I'm from Portage. Pick your spot, but that's where I'm from, and most of my frame for how I interact with people and understand the world is based on that place where I'm from. And then we all ended up at Purdue, and some of these differences created some clashes. And then here was this kid from Jersey that had lived a little bit everywhere, and I ended up being the interpreter, honestly. So one of my very best friends African American from Chicago, and he comes into my room 2 weeks into our experience here as freshmen, and he says, Orlando, I need your help. I said, what do you need your help with? He says, I need you to teach me how to talk to white people. It's a literal conversation. I said, what are you talking about? Just talk to him. He says, Orlando, you don't understand. Where I'm from, this is my first time being in an environment where I talked to people that weren't African American. And so while he and I were both African American, we'd had very different upbringing up until that point, being 17. So I thought about it. I said, well, give me a couple days. And so we created a program. And I said, well, I'll show you. This isn't a big deal. So follow me around. And we would go to things. We had the little job fair over here in the mall, or we'd interact with people in the lunchroom. And I would ask them to just watch me. They won't hurt you. It's okay. And it sounds funny now, because this person actually has gone on to be quite successful himself. But if he were here, he would tell you about that conversation we had in Cary Quad, a long time ago. And something as simple as, I've never interacted with somebody different than me. How do you do it? And that was a pretty big deal for him, because that interpretation or that ability to get comfortable with that was, one, going to allow him to graduate from Purdue, but two, was going to allow him to go on and pursue his career, which he's done quite well in. And so what I've learned personally is that I had developed a skill set around cultural competence. It helped me here at Purdue, but it's also helped me throughout my career, which is part of the reason why I've been able to jump. I've lived in Montreal, I've lived in Toronto, I've lived in Chicago, I've lived in Atlanta, I've lived in Turkey, I've lived in Connecticut, now I live in Seattle, Washington. And so I continue to pull on that ability to sort of dissect, a certain situation and figure out how to connect with people. And that ability to do that has afforded me a pretty cool life. So, and I think I honed that ability here. All right, this is sounding way too deep. So, what questions can I answer for you? What thoughts? Yes, sir.
I really like that concept. I've never heard that before, cultural competency. And any of the thoughts you have on how that could help us today as a country?
Yeah, so I'm pulling out my phone because I'm going to read you a quote that I carry with me, because I think it frames. This text from my wife. Thank you. Okay. All right. Yeah, exactly. All right, move. I got to do this. There is a book called Innocents Abroad, written by Mark Twain. And when I first moved into this industry, I went to a lot of industry events. And so there was a speaker, and he started his remarks with a statement that travel is the world's last-ditch effort to fix the world, which is a pretty big statement. There's a bunch of travel agents and people from the airlines and cruise industry and stuff. So he went on to explain that, and he referred to this quote from Mark Twain. So I'll read this quote, and then we'll kind of get back to your question. So in this quote, he says, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." And so whenever I talk to a travel group, I always congratulate them on the work that they do in helping change the world. Most of them don't think about their job that way. I'm here to get some people to sign up for a cruise and give me some money, and hopefully have a good time. But as you take people to parts of the world that they've never been, I think you actually do make the world a much better place, because it's hard to have some of these extreme views of people if you've sat and had a drink with them or broke bread with them. I'll tell you a personal story. So I moved to Turkey. So after that long weekend with my wife, we worked it out. We're going to go to Turkey. And I take my two children, 2 and 7 at the time, moved to Istanbul. Beautiful house. And 2-3 months in, we're going to have some of our friends over for dinner. Now, Turkey is 98% Muslim. We're a Christian family, no problem. And so one of the things that I know is true about Americans is that we've gotten really good at talking, but not saying very much. What do we talk about? Traffic, the weather, sports teams. Think about it. You're going to go to a reception tonight, and you'll talk about traffic, weather, sports teams, the game tomorrow. Purdue should do this, blah, blah, blah. We all do it. We've been doing it for years. In other parts of the world, what do they want to talk about? Race, religion, and politics. The things we're trained not to talk about. So now imagine, here's me and my wife, we're living in Turkey, we don't want to offend anybody, we're going to be quietly Christian for the next 3 years and have this experience, and then, whatever the next thing is. So we had studied the local football teams so that we were ready to talk about sports, not anything too controversial. So we're having dinner, and they're not even into the appetizer. My friend Gertai leans across the table and he says, Orlando, let's talk about this Jesus person that you guys love so much. And so my wife's looking at me, she's kicking me under the table. What do we do? I go, no, we can't deny Jesus. You got to talk about him. But I talked to Gertai after that. I said, why'd you ask me that? Why'd you go there? He says, Orlando, it'd be insulting to come into your house and not talk about something real. Why would I talk about the weather? We know the weather. Or why would we talk about traffic? And that was a big aha for me. And so as I've traveled the world, getting into things that maybe we are less comfortable to talk about, except with really, really, really close friends, other parts of the world want to get into openly. And so I think through that process of traveling and connecting and having real conversations. So he wasn't trying to convert me, and I wasn't trying to convert him. He was just trying to have a real conversation about our two cultures and what made them unique, and being respectful of you while you're respectful of me, but we're going to learn from each other. But all of those interchanges have really enhanced my ability to have impact around the world. I speak literally around the world. I've spoken in groups of 30, 300, and 3,000, and I've been in rooms literally just about in any country in the world. But I've learned how to do it through some of those experiences that I developed early on. One of the things I'm most proud about is my two sons, who are now 15 and 10, and they are very global young people. They study Spanish and Mandarin. I send my sons to China every other summer for culture and language immersion. They'll go for 3 and 4 weeks at a time. And so I tell my kids, I said, well, you're American, you look African, you speak Spanish and Chinese. I think you'll be good. So they should be. But this idea, because the world is becoming flat, this is a global economy, and so being able to tap into different cultures, and it's not about knowing everything about every culture, because I think that's the other mistake you can make. I've traveled to so many different places. I make mistakes all the time, but I own them, and it's done in a way. I'm trying to learn. So here's what I thought. Did I do it wrong? I'm sorry. How should I have done it? And that openness is what creates the opportunity, because people don't expect you to know everything about every culture. They just want you to respect theirs and be willing to have the exchange. And that's been really personally powerful and also professionally very powerful. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I think just listening to you say this about the international travel and the culture, you can be an excellent continued resource for the university, because this conversation came up no less than 3 weeks ago about how we're trying to encourage international travel abroad with our students. And somebody said, well, we have one of the biggest international populations right on campus. We don't have to travel to that campus. But the thing that was hindering it was exactly what you're saying. I'm afraid to talk to somebody who is from this country, and so we're not getting that exchange. But I think hearing you talk about that, you figured it out, and we need to talk.
Yeah. So, well, you guys are Holland America cruisers, so you'll actually experience this directly. So one of the things that we're doing as a business, as a brand. So what am I proud about? We go to 400 different ports. We go to more ports than any other large cruise line, which is wonderful. I like to differentiate between a tourist and a traveler. So a tourist wants to take selfies in front of things. I was here, check. A traveler wants to touch, feel, and taste the destination and the location. No, there's nothing wrong with either. I'll take them both on my ships. They both pay. But there is a difference. There is a difference. And so a traveler wants to have an experience. They want to taste the local food. They want to talk to somebody. They want to ask some questions. They want to make some mistakes. They want to learn from those mistakes. They want to have an exchange, because through that exchange, they feel better off. I have a better perspective on that part of the world now. And then I can bring that home with me and then hopefully influence my family. And I'll watch the news differently off of that experience. Having lived and traveled so much, I watch the news completely differently. I was supposed to have been in Turkey earlier this week, and some of my sister brands had canceled their calls to Turkey. I had not canceled mine because there was no reason to, but there was some questions about safety and things like that, and so we always try to protect the safety of our guests. So we ended up canceling our stop in Istanbul, but I was still going to go. I lived there, so I felt pretty comfortable. So I got a call from our corporate office saying, Orlando, we're canceling your trip too. And so, and I get it, given where I am in the role, they wanted to be safe than sorry, but I personally had no qualms with going because I'd lived there. I watch the news differently, so when they talk about something that's happening, I know where it is. Just like if something were happening in New York, which probably something is, well, that's in a different part of town. I'm not going to not go to New York. It's just a context thing. And I get it. If you don't have that context because you haven't lived it or experienced it, then we're going to try to be safer than sorry. But I do think by creating an opportunity for people to touch, feel, and taste destinations and locations, it will break down barriers and in a small way really creates an opportunity to change the world, which is what's so fun about what we do. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things while I am not a culinary traveler.
We can fix that though. So
But I did want to come and listen because I am a traveler, and I like to touch, feel, and taste.
Great.
Experience things. But I think, I look at the big cruise lines and say, why would I want to be a 3,000 passenger boat when, that's a city in itself.
So they're not all 3,000. I have ships as small as 900.
I've been on 63 passenger ones.
So it depends on what your interest level is. So each cruise line has a different personality, and so depending on your personality and how you want to attack that, I'm not going to. Different lines are all wonderful. But what my line specializes in is some of what we're talking about. So a classic style of cruising and destination experiences, and you have choices from more of a tourist experience where you can go with 30 or 40 other people and take pictures and walk around certain areas, to something that's much more experiential, and you have those choices. And then there are other options that are much smaller, and there are other options that are much bigger, and there's things in between. So what I always tell people is, let's understand what you want to do, and if it's me, I'm happy to deliver, and if it's not me, I'll send you to one of my sister brands, and then when you're ready for me, I'll be here. That's kind of how I've tried to manage that. So I'll never try to tell you that my cruise line is for every single person, because it's not. But it's for about 1 million people a year, which is cool. Yeah.
To be on a cruise. What are some of the other ways we can push that as ladies?
Yeah, so my advice, whether it's you personally, whether it's those around you, so this idea of exploring and experiencing the world, to me, is sort of a mindset and a lifestyle thing. And so I tell people, so let's say you work for a company and you're hoping to get an expat assignment. Well, so my question, how do you vacation now? What are the things that you do? Do you send messages that say, I'm global? I like to experience and explore. Do you challenge, those around you in a similar way? It's really about, some can go and experience it. Not everyone is able to go. But when you go and experience it, can you then come back and tell a story that debunks it for other people? I'll personalize it. So when I first went to Turkey, some of my family was like, what are you doing? And then they're like, oh, are you going by yourself? I'm like, no, my wife and kids are coming too. Really? Well, do they have to walk behind you and stuff? No, she can walk with, debunking some of these myths that exist. My mom was coming to visit, and for the 10 days up before the visit, she called me every day to tell me she wasn't going to make it because she was watching the news. I said, Mom, quit watching the news. I'm over here with your grandchildren. If it was a problem, we'd be gone, all right? So it took us, now when she came for about 10 days, had a wonderful time, and she still gets a call. We had a driver when we were over there, and he saves up all year, and he makes a call for about 20 seconds, and he calls my mom every year to wish them a Merry Christmas, ask about my dad, and ask about us once a year. And so her whole perception of Turkey changed from those 10 days. in that global travel thing. So then when she's back and talking to her friends and other family, it creates a different impact. Does that make sense? So that's sort of how in my family we thought about it. Some of us could go. We tried. My mother-in-law came and lived with us for 3 or 4 months while we were over there. We were able to bring a few of our nieces and nephews, create an experience for them. So it's really about sort of debunking some of these myths that exist about some of these parts of the world. Not to say that there aren't things you want to be careful about and places you want to manage, because that's that's real too. But I've found that there's something beautiful literally in every part of the world. I've been to places that you wouldn't necessarily call vacation spots, and I've had some amazing experiences in those places too. And so I love to tell those stories. The best mango I've ever had in the world was in Pakistan. I saw an Alicia Keys concert in Serbia, which was pretty funny because the only black people in the stadium were Alicia Keys and her group and me. And there I am in the 10th row, and she's singing, and she kind of, hey! And so I love to tell those kind of stories, because then it takes a place that maybe sits in somebody's mind in a certain way, and wow, he seems to be pretty excited and relaxed about the experience that he had there. Maybe that's something I might consider. And so, does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Is there anything new coming down the line as far as technology for cruise ships? New ships coming out, anything?
So that's a big question. So the short answer is yes. I'm building a new ship as we speak. You cruise with this?
No, I haven't.
Okay, we can fix that. I got a new ship coming out in April. Yeah, I got a new ship coming out in April. So the short answer is yes. I mean, clearly, as technology evolves, one of the questions I get asked a lot is around cellular technology and internet capability, and that's actually an industry challenge that we're all working on, but we're getting a little bit closer to that. And I think once we can crack the code on that, everything else is what we do with food and music and destinations. I think it's just is a wonderful way to explore and experience and see the world. And we want to make sure that we bring some of those other touches that people are used to on land and recreate that on the ship as best we can. And then technology as it relates to the pace and the speed and the safety of ships is the best that it's ever been. Yeah. So more fuel efficiency, more economically, environmentally friendly. And so it's a win-win both for the cruise company and for the guests, because there's safety and safety. Yes.
Not much more you can do with it.
Not too much more, no. But even the paints, I mean, there's a whole science. I mean, the paints and the type of paint that you use and the way they do the propellers and all those things help with some of the efficiency and fuel efficiency and the like. So there's a lot of energy and effort on that, and the way we manage waste and discard waste from the ship and trash and things like that. We take a lot of the world-class technologies that exist on land, and those are all. So these ships are mini cities, as you know. So there was another hand someplace, I thought. Yes, ma'am.
You talked about cultural competency.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at corporations today, you've seen inside of a lot of companies.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you say they are in terms of formalizing and training individuals to have that?
Yeah, so I think, I'm sorry. She was asking about cultural competencies and where do I think corporations are in their ability to train organizations and their employees around cultural competencies. Is that fair? Yeah, and it's a wide spectrum. So every CEO, I used to coach CEOs for a living, and every CEO in their speech talks about people are our most important asset, and they have some program associated with that. Now, a lot of CEOs stop right there because you have to look at the practices and what they actually do each and every day. So this idea of cultural competence is a continuum. I would argue there's awareness that exists in most companies because they know that we need to pay attention to some of these things. But have enough of them gone so far as to influence the way they remunerate and pay their executives relative to how well they promote cultural competence and understanding and diversity? One. Two, do they really get at their core level that being able to enable and build cultural competence actually promotes better results? And so there's research that's been done. A guy by the name of Scott Page wrote a book called The Difference. And in that book, he shows through math that how essentially a diverse group will outperform a non-diverse group if you have the environment that allows you to tap into the diversity. Now, if you don't, and people are fighting and arguing, then it will perform worse. And so some people say, I don't know if I can figure that out, so I'll just do what I'm comfortable with. But for those people that can create diversity across all the different dimensions, age and race and background and all those things, and figure out how to create an environment where people can really tap into it, those companies will outperform through idea generation, innovation, and better execution, particularly if that's something that's important to your business. So I inherited a business that needed some of that, and that's exactly what I'm bringing. So I'm not pretending to be an expert in the cruise industry. That'd be ridiculous. I have people that work for me that have been doing cruise stuff for 42 years. But what I am an expert in is how do you study a system, create an environment that I can tap into the individual genius of a group and put it together and come up with the best innovations that will take it from here to here. And that's what we're engaged in right now, and that's what I get paid to do when I'm brought into different companies. So that's what makes my life pretty fun, because I'm learning and figuring it out and building an environment with my team to try to enable that at the same time. So there's a lot of opportunity for corporations to figure out how to do this. For young people that are going out into the work world, there's a lot of opportunity for them if they can promote it themselves and conduct themselves in a way that they can help foster that in the environments or circles that they live in. Those that are able to do that, I think, will have a competitive advantage. In my book, Talentism, I predict that the corporation, the concept of a corporation, is going to go away. And we're moving to an environment where you'll have a small nucleus that will be the core of an organization, and others will plug and play. And you'll plug in, deliver some set of expertise for a period of time. That expertise will have some value in the open market. You'll unplug and then plug into another company and deliver that value. That's where the world's going. And so the idea of working for an entity for 30 years and getting the gold watch, it's not going to happen. You have to buy your own gold watch. Yes, sir.
Take you back. When you worked with me, you went on an internship with Pepsi.
I did.
What happened to that great product? You came back after that summer and you had the secret to tell us it was going to come out, it was going to be wonderful.
Was it a new soda?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, wow.
Pepsi Clear.
Yeah. Yeah, it was something. Yeah, I wasn't supposed to tell you about. I remember that. Yeah, honestly, I don't remember. I've been a part of a lot of secret projects since then. But I will say that experience, that whole experience changed really got my life on a direction. This idea that I was moving into the advice business and was trying to develop a collection of experiences that would add more value and credibility to my advice. And so while I was pretty young, I was still in graduate school, and I was driving down to Indianapolis 2-3 days a week, and I was teaching leadership classes. So it was pretty unique in that regard. And then I remember when we had the job fair, Pepsi offered me a job 2 years in advance, 2 years before I graduated. And then I was at the job fair behind the table with the Pepsi team recruiting other students. And we were next to the GE table. And the GE guy's like, so how long you been working for Pepsi? I said, well, I don't. I'm a student here. Well, why you got on a Pepsi shirt? Well, I'm recruiting for them. Well, why would you be doing that if you're a student? Well, I said, well, I already have a job. Well, when do you graduate? 2 years from now. And so he was like, I want to talk to you. So that next summer, instead of working for Pepsi, I worked for GE. You remember that? And then they had me serve as a workout facilitator. So I used to fly in when a plant was going to be closed or had some significant challenges. They would fly in a workout facilitator to go through a pretty dramatic process to make decisions about changes that needed to be made. And so they had special facilitators that would fly in to do that. So they would fly me off campus to these different plants. So they'd say, hey, can you squeeze this in maybe Thursday next week? Yeah, that's fine. I'll fly out. And I'd fly off campus and do these workouts. It was great. I mean, my last year of school, I actually made more money as a grad student. Yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. Yeah, once I graduated, I actually had to pay for stuff like housing and cars and stuff like that. It's like, hey, this grown-up stuff is not that great. Yeah. So that was that's kind of where I got my start. Yeah. All right, I have time for one more question. Any other hot, burning question? Yes, ma'am.
This has actually been, I think, a joke that circulates around senior citizens a lot in terms of nursing home and healthcare costs, and that with the affordability of cruise ships, that it really wouldn't be too bad of a deal to have housing, food, healthcare, and everything. You know, we have that all right there on the cruise ship, and some days it's less than the nursing home. Do you see anything in the future that would? I know there's some people who have been on there as their primary home, but I'm thinking of an industry focus.
So we've discussed it.
Okay.
And there are people, so I do a world cruise, 115-day cruise around the world, so it's 4 months. And so there are people it's a lifestyle choice. So they're on that world cruise every single year. So they've worked, they retire, they don't buy the home in Florida, they keep their main home, but they spend those 4 months on my ship. There are others that say they've done the math and they say, this cruise thing is actually a pretty good deal, and the health amenities on the ship are actually really good. We have doctors and the full meal deal. And so there are some that will arguably sort of say, I'll just live on the ship because the health support is there. We do not have plans to move into that space. So I'm going to continue to offer food and dance and those things as the primary offer. Clearly, if there's something that were to happen to you while you're on the ship, we've got wonderful care, but I'm not offering that as the primary. There are others that are discussing that. That won't be Holland America. Okay. Is that fair?
We'll watch.
Okay.
Somebody else is important.
Perfect. So it's 2 minutes to 3. I was told to keep you for an hour. Hopefully this was of some merit or some value to you. If you have questions or comments, you can track me down at work. My email is oashford@hollandamerica.com, so pretty easy to find, and I appreciate your time, energy, and attention. And if any of you do end up being on one of my ships and taking a cruise, let me know, and I'll try to make sure that we treat you really well. So thank you.
Videotape this, so we will have it on our website, and we'll have it available for some of the college technology, Polytechnic Institute will have it so that they can share it, and others on campus. So, like Orlando said, this is important information for our students, and obviously on a Friday afternoon, it's not a great time for them. Hopefully they're in class, but they might be doing other things. So we will make it available, so don't worry, we'll get it out there so you guys can use it, you can pass it to other people. You know about his books, are they locally available?
Yeah, so my book, if you go on Amazon, so they're printed just in time. So if you go on Amazon, print the book, and they'll ship it right to you. So my book that's out now is called Talentism. I'm actually working on my second book. I was just about done with it before I took this job, and I didn't get the chance to finish the last chapter. So I'll write the last chapter over the holidays, and that's called Career Soup, and that'll be out sometime next year. And so.
So if they put your name in as the author, they'll find you.
Orlando Ashford, Talentism, Amazon, it'll pop right up.
It's a great read.